We all know that every big nation state has a cyber army. What about Iran? Welcome to Threat Talks. My name is Lieuwe Jan Koning, and here from the Security Operations Center at ON2IT, we bring you the next episode. Let's get on to it. Welcome to Threat Talks. Let's delve deep into the dynamic world of cybersecurity. Let me introduce my two regular guests of the show. First of all, Yuri Wit, welcome. He is a security analyst and a security researcher here at the SOC. Today he represents the red team, so he is our proxy Iranian for today. And on the other side, it's Rob Maas. The blue lights on the back will give it away for you. He is going to help us understand how we should defend against the attacks that Yuri is going to be launching. So that's the setup for today. Let's dive in because, like I said, what about Iran? Of course, there's been a lot of turmoil at the moment at the geopolitical theater. So we wondered. We know that China and America and Europe and Russia have their cyber armies. But what can we say about Iran? And you actually dove in. We do have a thing, and I really have to look at my cards. It's a group called Muddy Water. I want to know from you if you know who made that name or where they named themselves. And the operation we're going to talk about is the operation, a real tongue twister. OLALAMPO, right? OLALAMPO. Operation OLALAMPO, yeah. So, Yuri, can you explain a little bit about what we are facing here?
Yeah, so Muddy Water is a nation-state group from Iran. At least it's associated heavily with the civilian intelligence of Iran. One of three nation-state attackers that we know of that are sponsored by Iran. Their main targets so far have normally just been in the MENA region, the
MENA region,
of Middle East and Northern Africa. Although lately, with geopolitical tensions, they have shifted a bit to the US. Their main focus is usually to broker access. So they're the ones that actually infiltrate your networks, gain persistence, and then either sell that or give that to the other Iranian nation states or exfiltrate data with it. That's kind of their whole deal.
Yeah, you probably don't know where they are at and if they're really government or whether it's a commercial party or right. It's
not
a bit
for sure. I mean, that's always with nation state attackers. You're never able to specifically know where they're from, what they're from, who actually signs the checks. But it is highly likely that this is from the the specific agency within the Iranian government for the civilian intelligence.
Why do you say so? Why do you think so?
Purely due to APT markers. I mean, the most common method of determining that is just comparing different attacks with each other based on the MITRE attack framework. Yeah. And if you see two attacks that are very similar in the techniques and the tactics that they use, then you can basically merge the info that you have for both of them. Do that a couple times and eventually you'll develop a
so
bigger
it's highly
picture.
Likely because of the reason, because if you have a toolbox on how to attack, it's not there's a lot of effort in there, so you're not easily going to switch those.
No.
So therefore, and everybody makes their own, and therefore we know this is Chinese, this is Russian, this is Iranian. Okay,
yeah, identification based on behavior, basically.
You mentioned identity broker. What do you mean by
access broker?
Access broker, yeah.
That means that they facilitate entry into target networks. So again, they gain entry, they get persistence like C2, command and control access, or just a straight up backdoor somewhere, either to do something with it themselves, or they can also hand over that access to other organizations that are aligned.
It's a nation-specific managed servers that the government can use to make sure that actually they provide the weapon and then the government can execute the weapon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right. So far, Rob has nothing to defend against. So tell us, what do they do? You looked at the operation OLALAMPO.
Yeah.
What happened there?
So for OLALAMPO, but what is pretty generic in all their attacks that have so far been attributed to Muddy Water is that they really, really like to infiltrate networks using Office files, so Excel sheets or Word documents with embedded macros in them that drop backdoors and command and control, malware, and persistence.
This is going to be a very short episode of Threat Talks because Rob, what is your opinion on macros in Office files?
You should disable them. That's if possible. There will always be exceptions. but it starts a bit before that. So you need to deliver, of course, the macro file. So I think you should start there with trying to prevent a user from receiving it or able to click on it. So that could be maybe with your email filtering, deny maybe just Office files and use different platforms to exchange those files. That could be an option. You have, of course, all kinds of email security settings that you can use to only allow specific domains, or at least maybe some domains are not trustworthy. You can block them. And if a user simply still has the file on the computer, then there's also still tools like EDR that can block the execution of macros, or at least if it is an unexpected or at least malicious behavior.
Yeah, because we can be sure, like right now it's via email. But if email would be blocked, then there's different ways, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So better. Okay, but is it then a very simple, like a novice attack? You think? I mean,
normally in macros should be relatively easy to defend against. Yeah.
But apparently it's effective then.
It is. But unfortunately, the reason behind that is user error. A very common tactic in all of these infected Microsoft Office documents is that they'll either blur the text or they'll print like a top layer onto the Excel sheet saying, oh, this is not working on your current machine. You should enable macros. And actually giving the user specific instructions. Because normally on Windows installations, if you install Office, untrusted files from the internet with the mark of the web will not have macros enabled by default. So we actually get that pop-up either saying, enable editing or enable macros. And so they'll embed layers into their documents that tell the user to specifically enable those macros. So yes, by just disabling macros, that helps. However, if you need macros for business reasons, then you're still relying on the human element to not enable them once they receive a sketchy file.
All right. So apparently there is a specially crafted Word document file that I have in my inbox. Apparently I click it because that's my mojo, right? And then what happens?
So you open the document, the macros execute, they're auto-executed the moment that you either open the document or enable macros. And then it does three things. It installs two different types of backdoors, and it also enables communication via a different C2 setup. So it's quite novel the way that they do that. Is it really aligns with their objective to just get access and gain persistence in the target network, because they basically delivered three methods to do so. The first one is via a C2 endpoint that communicates via a Telegram bot. So it basically installs a Telegram bot on your system that the attackers can then basically control via a Telegram channel that they own. Another way...
Yeah, one moment for this. So, and the whole reason they do this is so I mean, if you have an initial foothold on a machine, then it's nice for the attacker to remote control it. That's why it sets up. So why Telegram?
Well, that's actually a pretty interesting one. So, I mean, in different countries, the main chat app will be different. In the Netherlands, over here, it's WhatsApp. Pretty much everybody uses WhatsApp. But in other countries, maybe they use Telegram. And apparently, they seem to think so. Muddywater seems to think so. They most likely use Telegram specifically to blend in with all the other network traffic, because that C2 traffic is all TLS encrypted, so you can't see any of it. And it's going towards Telegram. So a SOC team might have a very hard time identifying the difference between C2 communication via Telegram and just regular chatting from users.
Yeah, because it looks exactly the same as a user who is chatting, and it basically poses as a regular user, but instead of talking to another human, it actually talks to another machine, which is the C2 server of the attacker.
Exactly.
Clear. And it's really hard to detect this way.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the C2 channel, but there's two backdoors that you also put on, you said?
Well, there are two C2 channels and then another backdoor. Although the naming gets a bit confused, because technically the other C2 channel is also called a ghost backdoor. That's the name that was given to that malware family. But that is a lot more like regular C2 traffic. It just connects to a domain. That domain hosts some either a blank or a dummy website, but behind the scenes, it actually requests or enables post requests and allows communication between the infected client and attacker-owned C2 infrastructure.
Yeah, so this sounds like a plan A and a plan B for command and control.
Mm-hmm.
How do we combat this, Rob?
Yeah, several ways what we can do. First of all, try to prevent that the files are being stored. And if they are stored, try to prevent that they are being executed. So EDR, again, will help you here. It can keep track of every process that's being running.
Yeah, because it should have eradicated the macro containing doc file, for example. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So, and once it's being run, EDR will check for behavior. Well, if it is only solely C2, that's kind of harmless behavior. It's just a network connection. So it probably won't trigger on that. And then you need some kind of network policies in place to prevent traffic going to places you don't want to go to. For example, why should a client or desktop connect to a Telegram server? And maybe you have a business policy that allows it, and it will be hard. But otherwise, deny all traffic. That's not necessary.
Yeah, it's harder on an endpoint, I guess. I mean, on a server,
on a server, certainly no reason. Relatively easy, but this is typically
malware is not executed on a server.
Exactly. And well, I'm not sure if it is unfortunately or fortunately that we live in an age where we allow internet access, or at least at most companies, users get internet access to almost everything, instead of allow listing what we typically do in security. So then it becomes hard to block these command and control servers, but it helps to have up-to-date threat intel feeds with known C2 IP addresses, for example, and block all that access. So there are a few things that we can do here, but in general, try to block all outgoing connections where it's not needed.
What's the most effective so far of all the countermeasures that you've listed?
For this part, I think since it's an end-user computer, I would say a good EDR solution that really looks at behavior, running processes, outgoing connections, etc., and tie that everything together to see if it is could be malicious or not.
Okay, clear. Yeah. So just establishing a command and control channel is harmless, you could say, if they don't use it.
Technically, yeah.
So what happens?
Well, from then on, the attackers have access to the entire user's machine. I mean, if they allow the execution of macros, then it is highly likely that none of the other endpoint security improvements have also been made. So at that point, the attackers just have access to whatever files are on the target's endpoint, whatever file shares are connected to it. From that place on, they just start digging.
Yeah, so for this operation OLALAMPO, the mission accomplished because the goal was to establish access, right?
Yeah, so establish access and then exfiltrate data.
Well, can you tell me about the techniques they used or the programming language they used? You already mentioned the RC2 works. Yeah. There's you dug into it.
Yeah. So they really just want to be very quiet. I mean, that's pretty general in most APTs. But it's especially prevalent in the OLALAMPO attack, where they not only use a Telegram bot as C2 to, again, hide in regular user traffic, but they also decided to make their more regular backdoor be built in Rust, which is great. I love Rust, but
it's a programming language.
Yeah, Rust is Rust is a low-level programming language, pretty recent compared to the others like C and C++. But what makes Rust interesting from a security perspective is that analyzing Rust malware or just Rust executables in general is a lot harder than in C and C++. It's like it has built-in obfuscation that just makes the disassembly of the binaries much harder.
Mm-hmm. But and why is that specific to Rust then? What do they do different?
I'm not entirely sure about that, but it must have something to do with the fact that Rust is what they call a memory safe language. That's one of the primary talking points about Rust. Is that the compiler does very strict type checking, so making sure that the data that you put in your application is actually what the compiler should expect or what the rest of your code should expect. And also has a feature where the moment a variable, so again, data in your application is no longer necessary, it just throws it away immediately. making it completely inaccessible. While in C and C++, whenever you need to use memory, you allocate a certain amount of memory on the stack in your RAM usually. And then after you're done with it, you have to manually deallocate and remove that data again. And, when that doesn't happen, then it's very easy to pull data from there. From a malware analysis standpoint, it's very easy to pull data from a binary while it's running. In Rust, it's just a lot harder.
Yeah, Rust is made with security in mind. I mean, it's really hard to, if at all possible, to make a buffer overflow in a Rust program, because it's designed to not have those kind of things. Yeah. And because of therefore it becomes more dynamic, probably better optimizable, and therefore it looks much more like rubbish. Yeah. If you compile it, so
exactly,
it's a good thing to. You should attackers should always use Rust then.
Definitely, yeah. Write all your malware in Rust.
Yeah. Well, everyone who uses C++ still, I think, is also a very good idea to swap to something like this. Okay. Anything else that you noticed that was interesting?
So they actually have a third method of gaining persistence.
Oh, yeah.
A third backdoor, basically, via something very novel, the AnyDesk application. And not some infected version of the AnyDesk application, the team viewer, the remote assistance tool, the legitimate one. They download it from their own infrastructure that they host themselves. So it is preloaded with the settings to give the attackers access to it. But it is just the legitimate AnyDesk binary. Nothing special about it. They download it and they run it, and they make sure that it runs persistently on the endpoint, so that they basically have RDP towards the target at all times.
It looks like it's a tool for the IT department actually installed, and therefore, especially if you use the same tool, nobody's going to detect it.
Exactly. Yep.
Or do you have a trick, Rob?
Well, yeah. First of all, if you don't use the tool, make sure that that it can be installed. So let's start there. So AnyDesk should not be on any computer if you don't use it yourself. And of course, here as well, you can control the connections. What connection is AnyDesk allowed to make to which server? And normally, you know which server is the one that you host or have running, and not the one that in this case Backdoors is running.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a rule to allow AnyDesk traffic anywhere in your organization if you're not using the solution.
Correct.
And certainly not to IP addresses that are somehow not yours. Okay. You mentioned briefly, from then on you can do anything, right? Yeah. Because you're the king of the machine. I mean, and these things happen. I mean, sometimes people do get access to a single computer. I'm immediately thinking of why would have a desktop all kinds of access, Rob? Is there something else we can do there in that area?
Yeah. So first of all,
zero trust.
We have seen it. Zero trust is the best strategy towards, I think, every APT or every attack. What we can, of course, do is lock down the machine. That's a good starting point. But in this case, if you already come this far, then apparently there's not much done on lockdown. And then you can only rely, I think, on either having an EDR on the endpoint that detects anomalies, so that you can at least see, okay, this endpoint is now doing something that it hasn't been doing before, so you can block it. Or
after
at least,
exploit.
Often after exploit. And also make sure that your endpoints, especially your clients, are in a separated segment, a network segment, so that you can strictly control network access from those endpoints towards your servers where your crown jewels, your data lives, to make that even very hard for an attacker to simply hop over to those servers as well.
Okay. Is it a sophisticated malware? I mean, did they achieve their goal, for example? I mean, do we know anything about it? Typically, it's hard for to analyze what a state actor achieves, right? Because their goal is to not show that.
Exactly.
Or to stay in the background a little bit until they need it.
Yeah.
Anything you can say about that here? What did they try to do? You mentioned they recently shifted to the US.
Mm-hmm.
Did they get anything there?
Not really. Again, it's always hard to say exactly what they got, but overwhelming evidence indicates that it wasn't super successful. The entire operation OLALAMPO seemed to have pretty much just failed, I guess. That can be kind of attributed to the fact that the methods they use are kind of simple. I wouldn't call them simple because it's still a nation state. I mean, it's still
still hard to pull off, but
Exactly.
compared to the bigger ones,
it's
insignificant. So it's what you can see. Yeah,
exactly. So
Do they, for example, I mean, we are talking about AI all the time.
Mhm.
Do they use this? Do we know this? I mean, for sure, everybody who is developing uses this. Do we see signs of it?
So that's actually interesting that you mentioned that, because one of the researchers that actually delved into the malware found from the OLALAMPO campaign found indications of AI being used to develop the malware. Now, there weren't a lot of specifics, but I think you can just translate that to maybe they found emojis in some source code file or some very blatant EM dashes or something like that in comments found somewhere.
Or a comment. That's an excellent question. Let me figure it out for you. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
So it's the things that we also see if we get an email and we say, this is clearly AI. That kind of thing. That applies to nation state malware as well. Then. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, in summary, I think we shouldn't be. Should we say that we are not too scared about this?
Well, I mean, you should always remain vigilant about APTs, but in this case, like.
You're not impressed.
I'm not super impressed compared to other APTs. I've been more impressed in the past. I guess the most important is just educate your end users, because it's all, at the end of the day, it's all phishing, spear phishing, but still phishing. So, yeah, not super overwhelmingly interesting, I would say.
Okay. Well, sometimes there's a little bit good news in cybersecurity. Then. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you so much for explaining about this. Different branch of malware that we've seen.
Mm-hmm.
And to our audience, thank you very much for tuning in. If you liked what you heard today, like and subscribe our video. We would really appreciate it, and I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to Threat Talks, a podcast by ON2IT Cybersecurity and AMS-IX. Did you like what you heard? Do you want to learn more? Follow Threat Talks to stay up to date on the topic of cybersecurity.